One of the most important questions we could ask ourselves, if not the most important question, is the question, why? Why do we do what we do, and why do we do the things that we do the way that we do them? And as important of a question as that is for us to ask ourselves, it's an even more important question for organizations to answer. Every organization should start with the question, why? Why is it that we exist, and why is it that we do the things that we do, and why do we do them the way that we do them? And because that's such a foundational question for an organization or anybody to ask themselves, that's the question we're going to be answering today. Why does Key City Church exist? Well, it was just under a month ago that we made the public announcement that we are opening the doors to welcome a community that we believe wants to exist here in Frederick called Key City Church. And we're just so excited about the response and so thankful for all of you who've reached out and responded with encouragement, with prayer, with the desire to get involved, with the desire to contribute financially. Just so grateful for all of you who want to join us and be a part of creating this community that puts love for God and love for people above everything else and wants to see the work of God go forward through this community in the Frederick area. And we're just so grateful for all of you guys and just so thankful to have you along for what it is that we believe God truly wants to do through this community. And we're just so happy to connect with you here. If you are hearing about Key City Church for the first time right now, I want to encourage you to either connect with us on our Facebook page at Key City Church or visit our website at keycitychurch.org. And what we're going to be talking about today is why Key City Church exists. And the reason this is so important, because for any organization, if the why doesn't stay foremost, then organization will always default to what and how. So when an organization always starts with the why. Why do we exist? What are we going out to do? What are we going out to accomplish? And then the organization should secondarily identify what we're going to do and how we're going to do it in order to accomplish the why. What happens over time that is just this tendency to drift in this direction is every organization will drift from focus on why we exist and shift focus to the what and the how we accomplish the why. And eventually, if that tendency or that drift isn't kept in check, then the what and the how, what the organization does and how it does it, will eventually dethrone the why and become the reason that that organization exists. And this happens in businesses that set out to change the world by creating product X, and they, instead of existing to change the world, they lose sight of that, and then they just exist to create product X, even past the point that anybody cares about or even wants product X. They keep producing product X because it dethroned their why, and the what became their why. And it happens in nonprofits that set out to make a difference in the world by providing X service. Then eventually X service dethrones the why they started in the first place, and doing X service becomes the reason that they exist, even at the point where it's no longer creating the impact that they set out to exist. And it happens in the church as well. Churches that start with a mission to accomplish whatever they set out to accomplish, and they're going to do it by what they do and how they do it. But eventually they lose sight of why, and what and how dethrone why. And what and how they do what they do become the reason that they exist, even beyond the point that the what and how are no longer accomplishing the why anymore. And chances are you may have grown up in a church like that, a church that started out with this intent that it was going to have this impact, it was going to make a change, it was going to make a transformation, and it was going to do it by doing what it did and how it did it. But what ultimately happened, it got so fixated on the what and the how, it lost sight of the why and stayed committed to the what and how, even when the what and how were no longer accomplishing the why. And this is why it's so critical to us as Key City Church to start with a really clear understanding of why it is that we exist, and ensure that why we exist always drives what we do and how we do it. That the what and how never replace the why. That why we exist always stays first and foremost, and our what and our how always fall in line in order to create or cause the why. So today, we're going to be talking about why Key City Church exists. And so when it comes to our why, we take our cue from Jesus. For Jesus, why was important to him too. In fact, it was why he came in the first place. So to understand Jesus' why, instead of me giving you my opinion, let's take a look at the words of one of Jesus' closest followers, a man named John. John, who called himself the one that Jesus loved. John, who walked with Jesus, who talked with Jesus, who saw Jesus with his own two eyeballs, heard him with his own two ears, and smelled him with his own two nostrils. John, who at the end of his life was exiled for the things that he was teaching and claiming about Jesus. Not things that someone had told him, not things that he'd been raised to believe, but things that he'd seen with his own two eyes. He had nothing to gain from what he wrote, but he had everything to lose. He staked his life on this, and exiled on this island. What John was staking his life on was what he was about to write. He was taking it upon himself to write up an account of the life of his friend Jesus. And the way that John starts out his account is by simply saying, "In the beginning was the Word." And what he's doing is he's drawing a parallel between his introduction and the introduction to the introduction of the Hebrew Scriptures, which is the book of Genesis. It starts out with, "In the beginning, God." And John is drawing this very clear parallel between who he's talking about, in the beginning was the Word, and who we're introduced to at the very start of the Hebrew Bible, in the beginning, God. The God who is above and behind and is responsible for all things. And he's not making an argument for a 6-day creation. He's not making an argument for creation over evolution. He's simply saying that there is this being who is behind and above and responsible for all things. And I want everybody to know this is who I'm talking about. The God who created all things and created men and women in his own image, who created men and women ultimately to be like him, to experience existence the way that he himself does. This is the narrative that John is drawing his audience's attention towards. And as the narrative goes, in order for them to experience existence as he himself does, they have to be completely free. And for them to be completely free, they have to be free to choose to align with God's way or choose their own way. And as we follow the narrative, what happens is these beings, these creatures, these men and women that God creates in his own image, they walk away from God. They use their freedom to explore other options, and they lose sight of what God is like and ultimately become very unlike God. And this God that created people, that created you and me to be like him, John is saying this is the God that I'm drawing your attention towards. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Greek word that's being translated word here is the Greek word logos, which simply means the reality, the undergirding, underlying reality of all things. It doesn't mean Bible. John's not saying in the beginning was the Bible and the Bible was with God and the Bible was God. It's the underlying fabric and reality, the design protocol for all things. John's saying in the beginning was the undergirding, underlying reality of all things. And that was God. And it was with God and it was God. It was the God, the Creator, who's beyond and behind and above and responsible for all things. And John's saying, now that we're on the same page about this, now that you understand the God that I'm talking about, let's move on. Sorry, we have friends. We're just going to have to pause. Niels, who came to our house and visited us?
Aunt Amy.
Aunt Amy did? And who else?
Mr. Walsh.
Uncle Wes did?
Get it off me, Daddy.
No, I'm not going to do that. You have a hair on you? Oh, it's traumatizing. Hold on.
You want sweet potatoes?
Me? No. And so then John says that the Word became flesh and he made his dwelling among us. And we have seen his glory. This is John saying that the Word, the underlying, undergirding reality, the one who is beyond all, behind all, and responsible for all, that he became flesh. He came and made himself human and hung out with us. And we have seen his glory. We saw what he is like. And if you're like me and you got to sit down with John and have a conversation with him, then you'd probably want to ask him the same thing that I would want to ask him, which is if you saw what God is like the God who is behind and responsible for everything, then what is God like? And John says he is full of grace and truth. Grace coming from the Greek word charis, which means unearned, unmerited favor, God's complete unconditional acceptance, that God came and revealed himself in human form, and he was full of unconditional, unearned acceptance and truth. Truth coming from the Greek word aletheia, which just means the making known of something that was previously unknown, the uncovering of something that was previously hidden. That God came in the person of Jesus to show us what he is like, to reveal who he truly is, and he is full of grace. And John would say it more briefly elsewhere in a letter that he would later write, where he would say that God is love. That if we were to sum up everything that we could know about the God who created everything, we would sum it up in one word, that God is love. Oh, I'll come eat it at the table. Thank you. Let's go have lunch. Come on, ready? Anything better than Thanksgiving leftovers? God is love. And even more amazing than the fact that the God who is behind everything is a God who could be summed up in one word, love, is the fact that when he came in the person of Jesus, his invitation was to follow him, not to ascribe to a religion, not to agree with a set of beliefs, but his invitation was to follow him. That having lost sight of what God was like and becoming very unlike God, that God has come to show us what he's like, that we would like him and want to become like him. So Jesus invited people to follow him, and people that were completely unlike Jesus liked him, and he liked them back. So the religious leaders are looking at this and they're like, why would anybody want to follow you? And if you're really a representative of God, people like that really shouldn't like you, should they? And so one day Jesus is having a conversation with the religious leaders, and they're challenging Jesus about why anybody would ever choose to follow him, and why should anyone choose to follow him. And so Jesus looks at the crowds that are following him, people from all kinds of backgrounds, people with all kinds of hurts and habits and hang-ups, people whose theology was atrocious, but who followed him nonetheless. And Jesus looks at them and he says, if you hold to my teaching, then you're truly my disciple. Essentially, if you follow me, if you ascribe to my way of living, not a set of beliefs, but a way of life, if you follow me and align with my way of living, then you are truly my followers, my disciples, my students. And he says this, and then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Essentially, if you want to know if I am who I say I am, if you want to know if I have anything to offer, then follow me. If you will follow me as the crowds are following me, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And behind all of this is the creator of the universe saying, if you want to truly know who I am, then follow me. Then just come follow me, and you'll see. As you follow me, as you become like me and become like who you were originally intended to be, as you live in alignment with the way that you were created to live, with the way that life was designed to work, when you follow me, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. To which the religious leaders are like, Well, free from what? And Jesus is like, when you live outside of the way that God created you to live, you become a prisoner to that. It deprives you of the life that God created you to live and experience. And Jesus goes on to say that we become imprisoned by false beliefs and misperceptions. When we believe that God is other than who he's revealed himself to be in the person of Jesus, that our misunderstandings about God, our misunderstandings about life and reality, and our misperceptions can bind us and hold us back and prevent us from being fully free. And in another conversation that Jesus had with the religious leaders, where Jesus was essentially reflecting back to them their misperceptions of what God is truly like. And he compared them to people who were blind, that they just couldn't see that here was God in flesh standing right in front of them to show them what God is like, and they didn't even like them. And Jesus was like, it's like you're blind. And they're challenging him. They still don't understand that this was God in flesh, come to show us what he's like and invite his creation to follow him, that they can become like him too. So Jesus tells them this story and compares himself to a shepherd who's come to call his sheep back to him, his sheep that have wandered off. Jesus says, this is why I've come. I've come not for the righteous or the ones who believe that they're righteous. I've come for the ones who've wandered off, who've wandered outside of the way that God has designed us to live, who've wandered outside of God's way of love and are ultimately living in ways that are harmful to them and harmful to others. And then he says this, Jesus says, I've come that you may have life and have it to the full. That the reason he came was to free us to experience life and life to the full. And the Greek word that he uses here for life is the Greek word sozo. And it doesn't mean natural or physical or biological life. It essentially means divine life, divinely given life, or God life, to experience life the way God himself does. That the whole mission of Jesus was to make known God's goodness and his love, to show us what God is like, that we would like him and want to become like him, that we would follow him and align our lives, to align ourselves with his way of love. Every single human being has been created in the image of God. That inside every human being is this God-like potential that's become constrained by all of life. It's become constrained by misperceptions and misunderstandings, the stories that we've been told about ourselves and the stories that we've believed about ourselves, by adverse and traumatic life experiences, by misaligned values, by behaviors that were once adaptive but have since become hurtful and undermine our happiness and our potential as much as they undermine the potential of others. That this God-given potential exists within each of us, just waiting for the conditions to release it. And Jesus' mission was to free that potential, to free that seed planted within every human being to grow into its fullness. That every human being would see who God has revealed himself to be in the person of Jesus, and see how he's created them to live by following him and aligning with his way of love. That they would become like him and experience the life that they were created to live.
My foot.
Why that happened? Are you guys having some trouble on the trampoline? You want to take a little space? Jesus came to show us what God is like, that God is love, and not just what God is like, but what he ultimately created us to be like, that he created us to align with his way of love, that it's the way that life was intended to work. It's the only way that life can work. And when we follow Jesus and align with his way of love, it frees us to experience and engage in our lives at the highest level. It allows our potential, the potential within every human being, to be fully released and actualized. And so the night before Jesus' crucifixion, when he's sitting around the table with his closest followers, he says to them, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, my students, my followers, by how you love one another." That Jesus, again, had come to show us what God is like, that God is love. And he's inviting us to become like him, that we would align with his way of love. People would recognize followers of Jesus by how they love one another, not by their theology, not by their ideology, not by what they say they believe, not by their opinions or their positions, but people would recognize followers of Jesus by how they love one another, that they would be recognized because they align with Jesus' way of love. And the disciples in that moment had no idea how much they were signing on to, because the full extent of Jesus' way of love had not yet been fully revealed. And just moments later, Jesus would look around the table again and say, "Greater love has no one than this." And then he laid down his life for his friends. Jesus, for the past 3 years, had been trying to explain to his closest followers that he was fully going to reveal the full extent of his love by dying on a Roman cross. And they hadn't understood it. They'd completely missed it. And Jesus is trying to call their attention to this again. In less than 24 hours, Jesus' love, God's love, was going to find full expression. That God's love is an unconditional, self-sacrificial love. That Jesus was going to prove that God is so for us, that he is willing to die for us, that the God who created us and has come into his own creation would allow his own creation to put him on mock trial, to spit on him, to abuse him, and ultimately nail him to a cross without lifting a finger in resistance or retaliation or revenge, in order to prove to us, to show us that he is completely safe, that we can draw near to him, that he's approachable, that we can trust him, that he's never going to be against us, he's always going to be for us, that we can follow him, we can trust that his way is ultimately going to be the best way. That he laid down his life on the cross to prove to us, if I'm willing to die for you, then I'm for you, and I ultimately want what is best for you. Will you just trust me and follow me and align with my way of love, my unconditional, self-sacrificial love, and be freed in to living the way we're ultimately designed to live, that we would be freed to experience and engage in our lives at the highest levels. After Jesus' crucifixion, Jesus rose from the dead 3 days later, just like he said he would. And John attests to this. He gives his life for it. John dies for this message. He had nothing to gain from making it up and everything to lose. And before Jesus' ascension to return to heaven, when Jesus was transferring his mission to his closest followers, that the mission that Jesus had come for, to free people into their God-given potential, that he was passing that mission on to his followers. He called them all to himself, and he said to them, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me," because he's proven that he could be trusted with all authority, because his rulership, his authority will always, always be bridled by his unconditional, self-sacrificial love, that he, above all, can be trusted with all power. He says, "All power and authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Now go and make followers, make students, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you." Go and make followers of my way of love. Go and make followers of all nations. Teach all nations how to live in alignment with my way of love. Not make Bible students, not make theologians, not make people who have all the right answers or align with the right politics. Go and help people learn to live in alignment with my way of love. And the first thing they did was they started a church. And it was a church where they taught Jesus' way of love, and they lived out his way of love. And people saw it, and they were drawn to it because it was irresistible. It was a church where everybody shared what they had in common, where everybody leveraged their best for the best of one another. And one of the witnesses of the early church, a man named Luke, says that every day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. And that word saved is just a form of the word that Jesus had used for life. It's the Greek word sozo. Every day the Lord added to their number those who were being sozoed, those who were being freed into God life, those who were being freed into their God-given potential to experience and engage in their lives at the highest level. That the mission that Jesus came to achieve, to free people into their God-given potential through trust in Him, is the mission that His closest followers carried on and accomplished through the church. That it was always, from the very beginning, meant to be the mission of the local church to free people into their God-given potential through dynamic trust in Jesus. To see people freed to become who they were always meant to be and do everything that they were meant and designed and intended to do. To experience and engage in their lives at the highest level. This was Jesus' mission, and it was the mission of the local church, and always has been, to free people into their God-given potential through dynamic trust in Jesus. We are not committed to what's or how's. We are committed to outcomes. We are committed to doing whatever it takes to free people to experience and engage in their lives at the highest level. That compressed potential, that God-given potential that is planted like a seed in the heart of every human being would be fully released and lived out as people align with Jesus' way of love. And we are committed to doing whatever it takes short of sinning in order to see that happen. And if we aren't seeing those results, we will never point the finger out there and say that the problem is with them. Our finger will always point back to ourselves because we're convinced that the local church has the message, the mission, and the means to truly free human beings into their God-given potential. And if the local church isn't, then the problem isn't out there, the problem's in here. And we're going to change and adjust our what's and how's until we accomplish the mission that Jesus has assigned to the local church, to free people into their God-given potential. We believe that there is God-given potential in every single human being, and we exist to set them free, to see that potential fully released and lived out. To see the local church pumping people out into the world, people that are living in alignment with Jesus' way of love and are exerting love-centered influence wherever they go and are having a positive impact wherever they are, in their families, in their neighborhoods, in their communities, in their schools, in their workplaces, that wherever people go, that they are making things better by living in alignment with Jesus' way of love, that His God-given potential is released. The entire tide rises. We believe that once upon a time, the local church changed the world. We are committed to seeing that happen again. And if this excites you and it energizes you and you're already a part of and connected to a local church, then by all means, take that excitement and energy and carry that back into the church where you're already connected to further God's impact that He wants to have through that church. But if you're one who is walked out and walked away, or just never thought about walking into a church in the first place, and this is interesting to you, and this is a conversation that you might be interested in continuing, and we would love for you to get connected with us. You can connect with us at Key City Church on Facebook, or find more out about us at keycitychurch.org. You can let us know there if you'd like to stay in touch with us and stay up to date on our upcoming events and activities and ways to get involved. We would love to stay connected with you.